slam continue, or can her sisters stop her in her tracks? The women's final of the Australian Open live in just over an hour here on BBC One Northern Ireland. Before that, we go back to a golden era.
That ball was on the line! Short flew up!
Nastase at times is really outrageous.
You saw it, everybody saw it.
Please.
That's it.
Oh, it's a good one.
But you can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
I came at the best time of tennis, which is the late 70s.
Oh, it was ghastly in the 70s. Oh, those bell bottoms and those big collars on her dress and oh.
People wanted to watch tennis because Chrissy was playing. My brother wanted to watch tennis because Chrissy was playing.
He had those tight shorts that now he'd probably be arrested if he put them on now.
Gorgeous Viking god.
That's it!
Sport likes to have legends, but they like legends to be sort of challenged.
I was talking to myself!
I'd see him as tennis's Eminem, McEnroe, because he's very good at what he does, but he upsets everyone.
Please tell me!
I think I psyched myself up coming out of the womb, so I was psyched up at a very early age.
He's won it!
I think Borg just thought, I can't keep getting up in the mornings and facing this fella. He's doing my head in.
It's the final week at Wimbledon, and some would argue that in today's modern power game, tennis has well and truly lost its balls. Those characters and personalities who defined a golden era for the game, a time when tennis ruled the world. The gentleman's game turned pro in 1968, bringing prize money, media exposure, and drawing crowds that the Beatles would be proud of when a new breed of showmen took centre stage at Wimbledon.
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone.
You just cannot fail to love Nastase. He is like a comedian out there. He's an amazing personality. He's a performer.
Nastase was this kind of ladies' man who had attitude.
Gorgeous and dramatic and Eastern European.
And that long floppy hair. Wonderful hair that used to just sort of draw back all the time.
I had a chance to beat him, and he suddenly ran off and sat in the crowd.
Nastase could do anything with the ball, so he was a magician on the court, and then he was very funny as well.
It's not unusual, it happens every day.
He was different. He was this long-haired, gypsy, temperamental genius who came to Wimbledon and started smashing his racket on the turf. You know, it was like almost breaking wind in church because you just didn't behave like that at Wimbledon.
He saw it, he wants to change, he saw it.
In my opinion, I don't think I was a bad boy. I was different than other boys.
Well, I think Nastase's doing a bit of play acting here.
Nastase, will you please come this side of the court? There is a second service.
Well, the umpire was much younger than I was, and I totally didn't have any respect.
First of all, you start very nice. You don't call me Nastase. You call me Mr. Nastase. That's better, yes?
Well, that was the start of it. From then on, everybody was addressed as Mr.
Call me Mr.
I felt like saying, well, I'll call you Field Marshal if you get on with the game.
After that, as the word goes around in the tournaments, and they start to call everybody Mr.
Nastase was more of someone who came out and, try to break your, the entire match, and then he'd go out there and you'd want to feel like you just wanted to punch his lights out, and then he'd come in the locker room, where are we going to dinner?
When Nastase turned nasty, the British tabloids had the fodder they craved, whether he was a bad boy or the nation's favourite clown.
I don't get upset. I think that's the nickname, and I thought it's coming from a short from Nastase, but I think I was wrong.
In the 1972 final, Romanian Lieutenant Ilie Nastase battled with US Sergeant Stan Smith and was hotly tipped to win his first Wimbledon title.
Stan Smith was the tall, blonde, mustachioed Mr. Boring, Mr. Play It by the Rules, and Nastase was A.
I just remember standing there and just singing and chanting and praying for Ilie.
Nastase was a very emotional player, and when he got down, he got very down. When he got high, he got very high.
I loved watching him play. He was extremely entertaining, whether he was winning or losing.
He was a far better player than Stan, and if he'd had been a little stronger mentally, Nastase would have won Wimbledon easily.
I can actually remember sitting watching that and practically weeping when Nastase didn't win. I thought it was such a tragedy that, you know, the right person didn't win.
For him not to have won a Wimbledon title with his game is ridiculous. But, you know, he threw too many titles away.
The tears of a clown when there's no one around.
With rogues like Nastase adding extra on-court entertainment, we became a nation obsessed with Wimbledon and strawberries. The players' antics brought the crowds flocking to southwest London, and so began our on-off love affair with the British weather.
Only in England could you have scenes of thousands of people queuing up in the pouring rain.
Oh, fantastic. You queue all bloody night, then you rush in.
Open up! People just come. It's one of those things you do.
I have to admit I wish more people could go and could experience it.
There's a certain sort of buzz around England when it's on. I mean, everything stops.
It kind of doesn't really make sense. I suppose if you dropped out of space, you'd go, wait a minute, these humans are really weird people.
It's seeing the big queues a mile around the block. It's seeing the ivy.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I remember really sunny, lovely Wimbledon days where we all went home with burnt noses.
The weather is not with it.
And then I remember these days where it just rained and rained and rained.
Well, I suppose you get an endless supply of water for your barley water. You just top up by just holding it out. There you go. You always knew when Wimbledon was coming up because you'd see the classic lemon barley water, Robinson's lemon barley water adverts that really were quite good. I mean, I used to love them.
Robinson's barley water. Anything else just isn't tennis.
Wimbledon is strawberries and rain.
I don't eat as many of them as I used to. I used to have a plate every day.
There's two things you got to have, strawberries and cream and rain. That's just Wimbledon.
Wimbledon in the 60s could represent Britain at its most pompous, particularly where the ladies were concerned. The establishment had barely paid lip service to the skill and achievements in the women's game, that is, until the arrival of Billie Jean King.
Well, she's all you'd ever want. She's the kind I'd like to flaunt and take to dinner.
She was a girl from a very modest background as a child. She came to Wimbledon, looked at it, loved it, was conquered by it, and wanted to be its champion.
She's a lady. Whoa, 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 she's a lady.
Winning a record 20 Wimbledon titles, one of Billie Jean King's most dramatic matches was the epic 1970 final against the mighty Margaret Court.
I was trying to go to the gym. I wanted to be Margaret Court because I thought she was so big. I didn't realise she was 6'1" and I was 5'5", and I had no chance.
Billie Jean was not as strong physically as Margaret, but she was a great tactician and had the stronger mind.
The crowd was tense. I think they could see we weren't at 100% physically. I couldn't finish. I couldn't go to net because my knee was shot. And Margaret's over on the other side. She's hobbling. So it's like we're totally wounded trying to figure out how we could finish this drama. That was a tough one to lose and a great one to win.
Frustrated by inherent sexism, she turned her back on the tennis establishment and founded the Women's Tour as part of her news-grabbing campaign for equal prize money. Eventually, the US Tennis Association backed down, but even today, Wimbledon still insist on paying the ladies less.
Billie Jean King didn't open just doors in tennis for women, but for men and sports and society.
She is the most important figure in the history of tennis, not only because she helped form the women's professional game and fought for prize money, but in doing that, she called attention to the entire game.
There's a great deal of support, I'm sure, for Billie Jean in this crowd.
Former 1939 Wimbledon champion and self-confessed male chauvinist pig Bobby Riggs humiliated Margaret Court easily in a 1973 grudge match which embarrassed women's tennis. and then set his sights on a new target.
And they call it the Mother's Day Massacre, actually, because Bobby Riggs beat Margaret Court 6-2, 6-1. And therefore, I had no choice. I had to play him.
I get along very well with a lot of girls.
The boys watch the girls while the girls watch the boys who watch the girls go by. Eye to eye, they solemnly convene to make the scene.
I picked him to win, and I remember down on the court before the match, she had been carried in by some beefcake guys, and she got down and she looked at me and she said, "How could you pick against me?"
Guys talk, girl talk, it happens everywhere.
And look at that.
A lot of the players thought I'd lose, and I really wanted them to just get totally behind me on this. I just wanted them to be loyal, you know, to say, "Oh, we think Billie's going to win," even if they didn't feel it, you know, like that's what I do for them.
There it is again.
There it is again.
More and more, that's been the story of the match.
Did I want to win? Absolutely. Did I think it was life and death? Yes. Women could not even get credit cards in 1973 in the United States.
And there, that's the kind of tennis we've had from Billie Jean all night.
She showed everyone more what was up here than what was coming through the racket. She was so mentally strong that day. She just was not going to be beaten.
It is over. Let's watch Bobby Riggs.
My dad was always he bit through 2 cigarettes when he heard about the result of that game.
The self-esteem of women in America was not very high in the 70s, and I think she helped a lot of women think, okay, I can do more, I can, you know, I'm worth it, I'm as good as a man.
Before the match, in one of the many press conferences, she said to the glory of all the women's lib movement, "There's no doubt about it, game, set and match, I'll beat the arse off him. Good night."
And that match was about social change. It wasn't about a tennis match. I mean, it was, but it really wasn't. And it's amazing how that it triggered so many people's emotions.
The mum didn't even know tennis existed as a sport, but once she realised that a woman had beaten a man at a sport that my dad thought was important, she was highly delighted. And for a brief moment, our household was divided by Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs.
A Wimbledon bottle party. Otherwise, the spectators enjoy tennis without seeing it. A ball boy without a hat. Apparently he left it in the cloakroom at Ascot.
It just looked like they were really just hanging around. The ones that stood at the back and just every now and again lifted their arm with a ball in it, you know, that didn't seem too demanding.
I would love to have more time with them, because when I actually meet them, they've been told to stand, you know, like soldiers, stiff as ramrods.
I couldn't wait to have the opportunity to actually be a ball boy, and my ultimate aim was to be on the centre court. Never quite made it, but I got out there and to the outside courts.
My sister and I used to try the art of ball girl techniques on the local tennis courts, and we used to run across, and you had to pick up the ball and carry on running in the same direction.
I remember one incident when someone sort of threw what I thought was a ball coming back, and I leapt out and I caught it magnificently. When I looked, it was an apple. Golden delicious.
Coached by his mum Gloria, Jimmy Connors, the bad boy from Illinois, was renowned as a volatile, hard-hitting Yankee with plenty of guts and determination.
Jimmy Connors was, what a fighter. I mean, how could you not love him? He's a character, different. You know, he's in everybody's face.
Connors wanted to know every one of the people sitting in the stands, and he wanted them to be a part of his match.
You know, he gave so much of himself to the crowd. People absolutely loved Jimmy Connors.
He was one of the first people to come in with the double-handed backhand Connors. One of the first champions.
Nobody did what he did, you know. Every time he was practiced for 45 minutes, like it was a tennis match. And Jimmy was a perfectionist, you know.
Me and Nasty are like this in a way, you know. I mean, we get along very well. I think our personalities are the same anyway. on the court and off the court. I learned a few things from him. He learned a few things from me. You know.
Good and bad?
Well, yeah, mostly bad maybe.
Jimmy was always a bad boy until McEnroe came along. Then suddenly Jimmy got good. But he didn't really change at all. Just McEnroe was worse.
Anytime you step on the court against Jimmy Connors, you know you're in for a lesson in intensity and attempted intimidation.
Move over, Roman. And let Jimmy take over.
Jimmy Connors looked like he knew people that might be having a word with you if you beat him.
Fuck you. I won't run from you like McEnroe, I'm telling you. You're going to let him talk to me like that? Well, you stand up and do something about it. About what? Anything you want.
Jimmy is always a very intense character on and off the court and looking to intimidate his opponents or get an edge any way he could.
Touché.
It was all about outwitting your opponent.
Save it for your rainy day.
Bouncing the ball. Was it Nastase? One of them bounced the ball so many times. Connors did that too.
I used to take the kids, you know, any of the girls, I said, look, you just watch some of the tapes of Jimmy Connors and just watch his attitude, his will to win. I thought he was a fantastic player.
Well played.
With the Stars and Stripes dominating both the men's and women's game, the bad boy next door was about to fulfill the American dream
When he teamed up with Chris Evert.
She came along, this all-American girl. She was just tremendous.
You know, most men, most teenagers would have always found her sexy.
Oh, I should say.
All the girls at school went to, we want to be Chris Evert. She was the first one that actually looked like a girly rather than sort of a Fraulein tennis frump.
From time to time, I may drift off into a kind of reverie, because I'll be off back in the 70s with Chrissy. She's fantastic, Chris Evert.
Chrissy just looked immaculate, no matter what stage of the match it was. I played her so many times, and I used to come off, my hair was stuck to my head, I was pink in the face, I was sweating, and I looked over at her and she was just sort of dabbing herself off like, and I thought, that's not fair.
Florida's golden girl Chrissy Evert had won the French Open title at Roland Garros, and at 19 was winning as many new admirers for her looks as for her peach of a two-handed backhand.
Oh, it's a good one.
Winning the final easily, she set up the prospect of a love double when her fiancé Jimmy Connors played in the men's final the very next day.
Jimmy and Chrissy, I think, as they were lovingly known as.
It seemed absolutely appropriate that she should be engaged to Jimmy Connors, although I thought, my God, he must be difficult.
I noticed that you've got the check in your bag.
Well, I'm just mining for him. Don't worry, after we leave this room, he'll want it back.
It was also all very innocent, wasn't it? It was just, you know, everybody's fantasies projected onto these delightful people.
Then as a teenager there were so many fanciable tennis players, and the way they dressed and the way they looked, you know, kind of acting out your fantasies on the local corporation park was something that was quite important.
Yvonne Goolagong, she was up on my wall. Loved her, the way she played, the style. I have to confess, I did love the grunt too, the little grunt. I'm sure many people did.
And mind you, Yvonne Goolagong, oh, Chris Evans is fantastic.
Embarrassing.
On the tennis court, if I ever got there, I was always the kind of the tubbiest, red-faced, most sweaty little lump. So to look at that summed up what tennis should be, but it always gave me a pang thinking, well, I wasn't.
Well, I mean, just sheer excitement, wasn't it?
Once I realised it wasn't Chris Evert, and it was highly unlikely ever to be Chris Evert, I didn't have any intention of buying the poster.
You wear it well, a little old-fashioned, but that's all right.
The fashions at Wimbledon had moved slowly with the times until a vivacious young French girl made her mark in the 1930s and swept away the whalebone and crinoline brigade.
When you look back at the history of tennis fashion, you look at Susan Longman and you look at the kind of furore that was caused when she showed her knees and wore a dress that was fairly short. But all she was a teenager who was dressing in a young girl's way, which young girls should be allowed to dress, and yet she was almost kind of kicked out of being a tennis player for being sexy.
And Suzanne would have none of that. I mean, she was the queen of Thailand.
Gorgeous Gussie Moran sent hemlines as well as pulses racing sky high in the 1950s when she was pictured wearing lace-trimmed pants designed by outrageous fashion guru Teddy Tinling.
He made some wonderful dresses, but I thought he made me, in particular, some fabulous dresses. He didn't go overboard with me. Mine were always fairly sort of chic and streamlined.
He said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Teddy," I said, "don't ask me what I want." I said, "You design me what you think I should wear." One of them was gold lurex. Every time I was serving and doing this and crossing, because my backhand's across the court and rubbing against, all these gold bits were flying off me.
A-line dresses were quite funky, actually. Sort of the end of the 60s, very early 70s. Even Billie Jean King looked strangely funky in that sort of dress.
I don't know why he put all the others in such beautiful ones. And I got gold lurex.
She's just a devil woman with evil on her mind. Beware the devil woman, she's gonna get you from behind.
Difficult to keep your eyes on the ball sometimes, I tell you.
You'd always be thinking, what bright coloured pair of knickers would they have underneath? There'd be some kind of shot, usually a drop shot, that they'd run to the net, and as they played their drop shot, you say, oh, that's a nice pair.
The frilly knickers were just amazing.
Well, knickers.
I can even remember my mum sewing them onto my underwear so I could have these special frilly knickers on the court.
There was a player, a minor American player, and she bent over, she said, "Look at my knickers." And I said, "Okay." She had her phone number on them.
Forget the forehands and the backhands. They weren't aiming there. They were waiting for me to sort of fall over or do something so that they could see what phrase we had on.
Beware the devil woman, she's gonna get you from behind.
Policeman's son Arthur Ashe had won the US Open in 1968, but had never prevailed on grass. As a youngster, he'd fought for the right to play on the segregated courts in Richmond, Virginia. By reaching the final in 1975, he had the chance to become the first black male Wimbledon champion. Only one man stood in Ashe's way, the red-hot favourite, Jimmy Connors.
I suppose it had the same impact on most kids as seeing sort of Clyde Best play for West Ham or something. You know, a person who was playing at the top.
Connors had been so devastating. People thought he was invincible at that time, and Arthur Ashe was such a good guy.
I remember not even bothering to watch the match because no one thought Arthur had a chance in hell. No one, apart from Arthur himself.
We who really loved Arthur Ashe didn't even want to go to the match because we thought he was really just going to be embarrassed terribly.
Connors to serve.
Arthur came up with this game plan that was totally foreign to the way that he would normally play.
He was a young America. Young America, so young America. He was a young America.
And I just remember Connors having to dig out about 50% of his shots. He literally would arrive at his toes, run into the net, and he had to dig them out, and he'd pass him or lob him. He just had a game plan, and it worked perfectly that day.
Arthur wins a set, and we say, "Oh, he's not okay. He loses in 4, you know." And he wins the second set. Oh, not so bad. He loses in 5. Then he loses the third set, and we say, "Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He loses in 5. Good story."
And Jimmy was there getting fired up and hitting. Everything was bang, bang, bang.
There was a time when somebody in the crowd shouted, "Come on, Jimmy!"
30-15.
And you could see then and tell then that he was rattled by it.
At the end of every couple of games, he would sit down there and you just see him meditate. He would just close his eyes and he was just calming himself all the time.
He had a tremendous sense of calm that I can only dream of anyway. It was one of those days where it was meant to be. I mean, you could see that early on in the match.
I was actually on the beach. I remember coming back into my room and someone telling me that, you know, Arthur was about to win Wimbledon. And I was like, yeah, pull the other one.
That's it! And he's done it. He really has done it. A man of vision, a man of character, and here he is, at last, the Wimbledon champion.
It was the perfect ending. It was totally unexpected. It was a huge upset and a very gratifying afternoon.
Can it be that it was all so simple then? Or has time rewritten every line?
I think it was time for a black man to win Wimbledon. You know, I really do, and I think it was some divine intervention in a way.
I think it was one of the greatest upsets in finals in Wimbledon history.
Following this incredible victory, Ashe tragically contracted the HIV virus through a blood transfusion during surgery. Becoming a fierce campaigner in the fight against AIDS, sadly he died in 1993.
You know, what he did for human rights is phenomenal, and what he did at Wimbledon that day when he beat Jimmy Connors was also incredible.
He'll always be remembered, not only as a great tennis player, but a great inspiration to a lot of kids, not only black kids, but kids in general. I think it would just prove that, you know, you can achieve so much.
Hackney Council has launched a new scheme to take sport to the people.
Around Wimbledon time, the tennis courts would fill up unnecessarily, and rather than go down and play, my friends and I would go down and watch how bad these people were.
So my earliest tennis memory is Corporation Park, Blackburn. I was Bjorn Borg, and my opponent was Rosie Casals.
Every tennis court and every tennis club has the local decent players who would thrash some poor little kid.
Swing ball I remember being quite violent. My sister and I used to play, and when the ball got caught and the rope got shorter and shorter and the ball was kind of going into the middle, you'd get in to try and hit it, and then my sister would whack it back, so it would come right round and get me on the head.
But lots of people think because they're good at swing ball, they're good at tennis. Well, I say no.
Well, I was always Johnny drop shot, I was.
I found any wall I could get and just banged a ball against it for hours on end.
I would play before school, I would play against the wall, I just wanted to play the game.
In 1976, Britain was sweltered by the long hot summer, when ice lollies melted, reservoirs dried up, and normally damp Wimbledon courts were left bone dry by the baking sun.
That year, I got sunburned on the beach. Can you believe it? In Scotland, I got sunburned in Scotland.
And there's a hot guy that arrived at Wimbledon called Bjorn Borg, this little blonde bomber with the, I don't know, did he have the headband then?
Get me now, will I ever learn?
To me, he looked like an ABBA reject. I know he was Swedish and stuff. I don't know whether he auditioned for the band and they kicked him out and he sort of went, oh, well, I'll go and play tennis.
I'm sure he can sing. The man's very talented.
Mamma mia, here I go again. My, how can I resist you?
He was gorgeous to look at. He was flamboyant with his dress. He was just this sort of gorgeous Viking god.
I think there was an aura that Bjorn brought with the headband and the hair, and there was girls running around at Wimbledon.
And even on the centre court, we've got the teenagers rushing on. I've never seen this before in my life.
And the staff were all touching because they had little high-heeled shoes on and were marking the court and all that. And they pursued him so avidly, he had to get out of the gentleman's window, toilet window, to escape them.
We were all amazed that we saw this young guy who was just a few years older than us, and it seemed like it was almost like out of a rock group or something. It was unbelievable.
Oh, everybody chased him. And he was a beautiful young man, there's no doubt about it. And the girls were going crazy, and I don't think the bobbies had ever faced, you know, they'd faced tough crowds, but they hadn't seen teeny boppers running after a tennis player before.
I thought
these girls, why are they screaming? The Beatles aren't here.
You have to ask the girls about that. I don't know.
Sexy. Yeah, smashing. He's quite something.
They used to come into Wimbledon. They never saw a ball hit. They used to stand waiting for him to arrive and wait for him to leave. So they just wanted to see him and scream at him.
It was a security worry to put him on the outside courts that he even get to the match alive.
This 20-year-old Swede, who only took up tennis after his father had won a racket in a table tennis competition, was now ready to take the green grass of Wimbledon by storm.
You're just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off you.
I played Borg, first round. I started him off, and this is what I keep saying, that was the first match he ever won on his way to winning 5 championships in a row.
In that year's final, in the blistering heat, the ice-cool Swede faced the Romanian hothead Ilie Nastase in a sizzling showdown for the Wimbledon crown.
Can't take my eyes off you.
Nobody realized that year that Borg was the future champion.
There's nothing.
Okay, let's go. Well, that's pretty nice, you know.
Once I got on the court, I forgot about that.
You feel that tension, you feel that concentration, and sometimes the applause that they come out, I feel they don't want, they just want to get on with it.
He was unbelievably fast. He could run non-stop.
I didn't want to play like him because he didn't have enough soul. He never shouted, he never got upset, he never threw his racket.
He's a freak of nature, that he can go out there and sort of nothing phases him. I feel like I'm more like the normal person. Maybe normal people won't want to admit that.
Somebody asked me, you lost to a young man. I said, I don't lost to a young man. I lost to an experienced man and also a man coming from another planet.
His agility was incredible. His concentration was unbelievable. And he could win on his least favourite surface, you know, grass.
That's it. He's done it. Match the ball.
Even with a game more suited to clay court tennis, Borg's domination at Wimbledon was unquestionable. The ultimate athlete, the Swede had proved himself invincible on grass.
And we're probably looking at the greatest player the game has ever seen. Certainly at this age, nobody has achieved what Bjorn Borg has done.
Whenever Borg won his Wimbledon titles, one of the things that he always did was fall to his knees on the centre court and raise his hands to the sky.
He would not shave from the beginning of a tournament. If he won Wimbledon, his beard was getting pretty long towards the end of it.
Yeah, some of the guys, you know, Vitas Gerulaitis, re-wrap his grip all the time with that gauze stuff and wouldn't walk in the lines. John McEnroe still doesn't walk in the lines.
I go to the same bathroom, to the same bathtub.
I had to feel the grass with my hand, at least one hand. The palm of my hand had to feel the grass.
There are plenty of tennis players who always ask for the same ball back when they've just won a point.
I always used to bounce the ball twice before the first serve, once before the second.
Summer 1977, and it was Silver Jubilee fever. Street parties, commemorative mugs and Union Jacks were taking over. But could we do the same at Wimbledon? Heartthrob and teenage pin-up John Lloyd led the way for a possible British winner in the men's. Hopes were raised when he defeated number 4 seed Roscoe Tanner in round 1. But jubilation quickly turned to disappointment when he lost in the next round.
77 was the year that Virginia Wade was in the semi-finals, and so was Sue Barker against Bessie Stover.
The pressure was on for Sue Barker. Virginia Wade had won her semi and everyone wanted an all-British final. To make this dream come true, Sue had to defeat the mighty Dutch girl Betty Stover.
There was this feeling that in that year of all years that we must win.
The whole country wanted a winner.
I didn't feel particularly nervous going out there. I can't blame that. I think the crowd were fantastic. I just played a horrible match.
Advantage, Miss Stover. That's it.
So not to be an all-British final after all.
I'm sorry that Sue really couldn't, pull out that little bit more.
I felt, I'd let myself down, and I'd, let a lot of the fans down as well, because they wanted to see an all-British final.
And so the final then, Betty Stover to play Virginia Wade.
Although Sue didn't make it to the finals, the Queen did, making her first visit to Wimbledon since the early 60s.
If this is the year to be in the final of Wimbledon, if there ever was a year, this is it.
Determined that if the Queen was going to be there, she would be too. At last, Virginia Wade walked onto centre court for a Wimbledon final. It was her 17th attempt to fly the flag.
For years, we'd been urging Virginia Wade to win Wimbledon.
Virginia had it in her soul. She was up for it.
Did you watch Virginia in the final?
No, I couldn't. I went out and spent an enormous amount of money in London because I just had to distract myself from what was happening.
Betty and Virginia were so nervous. I was up in the dressing room before they went out, and you could just see they could barely breathe or swallow, and I'm sure they're hyperventilating, and it was very difficult for both of them. Betty Stove's from Holland. There'd never been a Dutch woman who'd ever won Wimbledon, and here's Virginia being English, and the Queen's there. I mean, the Jubilee year. I mean, there's a lot of pressure going into this match for both of them.
Wade to serve, first set.
Thinking, oh no, because as you know, Virginia and Wimbledon didn't go together. She was always losing first round matches or being beaten by girls she should have slaughtered.
For so many years she got to the last 16 and the last 8 and the last 4, but always seemed to just miss out on the final.
In the past she's often said that she's felt at Wimbledon that she doesn't play her best because she's bothered by various problems.
When I lost the first set, I thought, everybody in the crowd was very hysterical anyway, and I thought they were panicking, and I thought, that's not the way it is. I'm going to win this match.
Wade leads by 4 games to 1 in the final set.
Every point that Virginia won, the whole country cheered and danced.
I'd be the first to stand up in the middle of the chairman's box on the centre court and cheer, I can tell you.
The only thing that came close to this sort of euphoria was when England won the World Cup. And then I thought to myself, my God, that's because I won. And it made me feel extremely humble, I can tell you that.
Virginia Wade winning Wimbledon was just amazing. And I still can picture her curtsying and what she wore and the racket and everything.
I remember, the crowd singing and chanting when she won, and the Queen coming down and Virginia talking to her and having a little chat.
She starts talking to me and I have no idea what she's saying because there's so much noise going on. I mean, it was so noisy. By the time I'd said, excuse me, once or twice, I sort of thought I assumed she's saying something pretty straightforward.
It was a wonderful end to a good fortnight because she'd always promised so much, Virginia, always wanted it so badly.
We needed an antidote to the patriotism and jolly good fellows on centre court. Enter the 18-year-old cocky New Yorker.
He was different. He was one of the new breed of tennis players coming in who was a human being, who behaved like one.
You're quite sure?
7-all.
Oh. The ball was so far in. You see it in?
I always grew up believing that if there was something wrong that you should argue, you shouldn't just forget about it. I mean, when you see a bad call, you shouldn't just go, well, that's a bad call and not think about it. You go up there and say, that ball was in or out.
Now McEnroe must just buckle down, play to the umpire, and try and win this set.
I mean, he was a rebel, but the thing that I liked about him was he played with so much passion. It's him.
He appeared in with his long hair playing a game of tennis that comes once in a lifetime.
I thought this bloke is going to be one of the greats.
If you weren't a tennis player, what would you have liked to have been?
Rock and roll star.
Do you have any musical talent?
No.
I remember my sister and I definitely used our tennis rackets for pretend band sessions more than we did for actually playing tennis.
That is definitely me.
Other alternative uses are to bounce it on somebody's head.
Oh, fly swatting.
We get these great big dragonflies at us. So I just sit there with a racket, backhand in them.
A weapon to hit my brothers with, and also a pair of them for snowshoes, because we did have it was a big strong winter, I think, shortly after the long hot summer.
Well, after seeing Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon in that film The Apartment, when he used it to strain his spaghetti, anything's possible after that.
So you're pretty good with that racket.
You should see my backhand.
You say either, I say either, you say neither, I say neither.
Of course, over the years, with more and more foreigners coming in to play tennis, the pronunciations of the various names became more and more difficult.
Game to Zuccarelli.
Game to Miss Antonopoulos.
Once Eastern Europe hit Wimbledon, I think the umpires probably had to go to sort of night school to gem up on how to pronounce everybody's name.
Advantage, Miss Mandlikova. Martina Navratilova.
Navratilova, when she first hit the scene, was always a tricky one for the umpires.
What was another one? Eastern Vic.
Martina Navratilova. Oh my goodness me.
It's not really that difficult if you just sort of slow down.
Advantage, Miss Navratilova.
It's not like football where you've got to remember 22 names.
Quiet, please.
You've got to remember 2 names. You've got all day. They don't start till 2 o'clock.
To this day, they still sort of bungle it up sometimes. And I'm like, how many Wimbledons do I have to win before you can pronounce my name right?
1978 premiered the greatest rivalry in women's tennis. Martina Navratilova, the recently defected Czechoslovakian, challenged prom queen and reigning champion Chris Evert to the first of their many centre-court battles.
Here you had the 2 best players in the world, and Martina was just rising to the top about this time. This was like her first big moment on the rise to being number 1, and I think I really could sense that.
My first final against Chris was kind of funny because we were trying to figure out who the crowd was going to cheer for, because we both were the villains. I beat Ivan Gulagang in the semifinals, who they loved, and Chris beat Virginia Wade.
Martina Navratilova was seen as, stocky. I'm here as a big functional tennis woman, and Chris Evert is like, I'm here, I can play tennis, but look, I shop and I'm conscious of what I'm wearing. The difference in grunts was quite funny. And then Navratilova, and Chris Evert,
Martina drove Chris to her best tennis. Unfortunately, Martina's game on grass was a very tough game for Chris to compete against.
Grass was Martina's best surface, Chris Everett's worst surface.
It was at 40 love match point, and my heart was just beating so loud I was convinced everybody in the stadium could hear it.
I guess when she hit the last shot, she knew. She could feel the ball on the strings, and she knew that she was going to win.
That's it. She's done it.
I remember how much Chrissy wanted to win it and how much Martina wanted to win it, and how difficult it must have been for either girl out there because they were close friends.
I kept saying, I can't believe it. Yeah, I can't believe I won. It's like, wow, it really happened. Of course, then I thought the whole world was going to come to a standstill and say, oh my God, you won Wimbledon. Nothing changed, only my world.
She was like the start of a new era, wasn't she? And this discipline and professionalism. Let's all find out what her diet is.
She was the first one that really started training, really started to work out in the gym, and really used that physical presence to dominate.
I think I was the first one that said, I'm a woman, but I'm going to be a great athlete. I'm going to be strong, and I'm not going to apologize for that.
You know, Martina could impose herself physically. She was just bigger and stronger, and use that as part of her game plan.
I think she brought a sense of physicality to the game where people are like, oh my goodness, women can be that physically strong.
Martina's physical strength helped her to achieve her lifelong ambition of becoming one of the greatest female tennis players of all time. She played against Chris Evert in the Wimbledon final a total of 5 times. Martina won them all. Tennis had become body conscious. It also became fashion conscious. Modelling their freshly toned muscles with the latest tennis designs, the tennis players set the trend both on and off the court.
And the British label that kind of worked from tennis and went through to the high street was Fred Perry.
Stockport lad Fred Perry rose from his job as a clerk to become a Wimbledon champion 3 years running in the 30s.
You know, Fred Perry was a tennis player and a tennis label. And it was taken up by the mods in the early 60s, and that was because it was a very clean look.
As the mod image hardened, the Fred Perry became firmly established as the uniform of youth culture.
I was a skinhead, I was a rude boy skinhead, and like Fred Perry was, you know, to get your hands on a Fred Perry was brilliant. I mean, we used to go to all the jumble sales on a Saturday morning, desperate to find a Fred Perry. That's what it was all about.
With their newly found fame, the tennis players became the perfect clothes horses for fashion designers. The Italian labels took over the tennis court and high street fashion.
It was the introduction of a bit of colour and the stripes on his shirt.
Bjorn Borg had all these wonderful feeler outfits and everybody wanted to dress like him.
The feeler was the tracksuit to have when I was at school.
He had a great physique, and the stripes that basically was sort of designed for him, and he had those tight shorts that now he'd probably be arrested if he put them on now.
If you're going to wear the shoes and the top, you should wear the shorts as well, and that doesn't play big in the nightclubs of South London, especially if you've got a ball sticking out of the pocket.
I got a big ass and big legs anyway, but they used to make it super tight, and you know all the guys, they give me a hard time. They go, Cashy, we had tight shorts, but yours were ridiculous.
The white shorts and I'm seeing my hands are going like that, isn't that dreadful? The cute sort of little bum. I don't know what it was just, and the white against the tanned legs and so athletic.
Unsportsmanlike conduct. Warning, Mr. McEnroe.
In 1977, he was a mere child throwing his toys around. But by 1980, the electrifying temperament and seat-squirming rebellion had been perfected. Move over, Jimmy. It was time for a new bad boy.
You think I stand there for my health? Answer my question! Foot out, man! The question, jerk!
It was completely thrilling when McEnroe had one of his outbursts.
Part of the reasons that you watch McEnroe is because you wanted him to have a fit. You know, you wanted him to have a ment at one of the line judges.
He was a nutter. But that's what I liked about him.
You guys sit here like two bumps on a log and say nothing because some idiot in the chair comes and just does nothing.
It was pretty shocking. I mean, there's no doubts about that. You know, we were all sitting there watching the TV and going, whoa, did he really say what he said?
I loved McEnroe, and you know, I suppose people would say he was my sort of player.
Borg chasing his 5th title, McEnroe looking for his 1st. Everyone waited with bated breath to see if Superbrat could topple the Swedish iceberg.
When you think of 1980, the final between Borg and McEnroe, well, that was the greatest, many people say the greatest final ever.
Borg was ice cool, he was the Iceman, and you know, really he was dominating it, and you know, I think everyone was sort of relieved when McEnroe came along to sort of, you know, have a go at him sort of thing.
It was certainly a match that going into I felt like I should win and that it was my time.
I wanted McEnroe to win because he was the guy that I played like.
You're either a Borg or a McEnroe fan, and I just grew up just loving Borg, everything that he did, everything about him.
You'd have the steely Swede versus the sort of loopy American.
The cool one against the nutcase.
It was two big guns playing one another.
They were the competitors in that era, the gladiators.
Time break now comes into operation.
No
final has ever ended on the tiebreak, but it might now.
90 out of 100 people come up to you, maybe more, they'll talk about that match and that tiebreaker.
In that tiebreaker, neither wanted to lose.
It was so up and down. It played with our emotions. You know, one minute you're screaming for Borg and the next minute you're screaming for McEnroe.
It's like, oh God, you know, and the shouting and looking up, and Bjorn, the ice cold, is looking straight ahead.
If Borg wins this point, I fancy the roof will blow off the centre court. Oh, a marvellous volley again.
It absolutely sent shivers down your spine.
Oh, unbelievable shot. Yes, 2 sets all.
At the end of the tiebreak, the entire crowd rising to their feet and cheering and stamping and whistling, and everywhere I looked round me, almost every woman was crying, and half the men as well.
After like 25 minutes, having like 7-8 match point, I thought I was dying out there at the court.
I sat down in that changeover after winning that. There was no way I could lose. But fatigue started setting in, and Bjorn is, I've always felt, is the greatest athlete that's ever been on a tennis court.
You know, the tiebreaker went on, and at the end of the day, you know, Borg's legendary fitness, I think, got him through that. I mean, he was just phenomenal.
For McEnroe, that must have been just the worst feeling he could have ever had, because he felt he had the guy.
5 times, an absolutely unique person in the history of the game.
McEnroe couldn't believe it. It forged their friendship, and it also forged their tremendous rivalry.
En route to the rivals' next centre court duel, McEnroe coined the catchphrase that catapulted him into the consciousness of every British household.
You cannot be serious.
You can't be serious.
You cannot be serious!
It's made its mark.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious! That ball was on the line. Chalk flew up. It was clearly in. How can you possibly call that out? How many you can miss? He's walking over. Everyone knows it's in this whole stadium, and you call it out? Explain that to me, will you?
The ball's in! Everyone can see that the ball's in! Oh, gee, man. Chalk dust! Everyone could see that there was chalk dust!
It's still on skits on TV now.
You cannot be serious! I did not slurp my orange juice! I did not slurp my drink! Did I slurp my drink? Did you hear a sound? Did you hear a sound? Tell me!
The drink was slurped.
Jesus Christ!
And of course the papers just fed on it, and it was a great story, even though they were blasting him this and that, and what a story it was.
I think I was the first to call him the Incredible Sulk. Then there was the Prince of Petulance, King's Sneer. He'd read them. He said he never did, but he'd read them. His lip would curl when he saw you.
McEnroe's ranting started to rattle Borg, and the pressure began to show.
Delay of game penalty. Point to Mr. McEnroe. 5-3 McEnroe.
Well, there it is. Mike Lugg has now awarded a penalty point against Borg. I can't ever remember seeing that happen before.
And I met John in a bar in New York. We were talking, and it laid down then and there before us the formula for ambushing Borg the following year. Because they were like that, you know, ice against fire.
I feel very good, but it's going to be a very difficult match against John, and I just know I have to play absolutely at the top of my game.
This was one that I couldn't let slip away.
With all guns blazing, the Borg and McEnroe centre court rivalry reached its pinnacle in 1981. Borg, ready to defend his honour at Wimbledon, had a fight on his hands, as McEnroe was more than prepared to win the duel.
Are you ready for this, girl?
Brilliant play. I was in Abbots Langley High Street in Watford, outside one of the television shops, and I think I let 2 buses go past because I was just glued to it.
My memory is of standing up on tenterhooks, all of us.
You couldn't go and put the kettle on. You couldn't leave. You had to stay there and watch it.
Borg was the Alsatian and McEnroe was the Jack Russell, and he just kept hanging onto his tail.
When I was able to finally win the match point, it felt like suddenly, for that few seconds, I could fly.
Well, is an era about to end? An era that stretched for 41 matches.
Everything that had gone into trying to win this had finally come to fruition.
Looking at Borg, I thought he looked like somebody whose pet dog had just been run over.
I think people were devastated. It was like a change of government. He'd ruled centre court for so many years.
McEnroe drove Borg out of the game. That was really the end. He left Flushing Meadow. I can't forget that in 1981. He didn't come to a press conference. He didn't come to the presentation of the trophy, which was very unlike him. He just ran for the exits, and his people, his retainers, ran with him. A car was waiting. He ran through the kitchen of the building, and with reporters following, I was one of them, and he jumped into a car, and it rolled up the windows. We said, Bjorn, won't you say something? Drove off, and he drove out of tennis.
Angel sings, there are greater things. Can I give them all to you?
McEnroe was the last bastion of character tennis, dominating the game as the #1 seed for the next 4 years.
One thing John had going for him was that what a great player he was, and even Wimbledon in the end accepted that he was a genius.
I remember speaking to Bud Collins about McEnroe, and Bud turned around and said, he doesn't even practice. He's the most natural tennis player he's ever seen.
He had the most incredible, unorthodox way of playing. I mean, his serve is, everything is, textbook, out the window.
He played with passion, he played with his heart, and, people used to say, why did you go and lose your temper there? But I used to sort of understand him. In a way, it's just, there's second is nowhere.
I never thought I'd miss you half as much as I do.
As you get older, you look back with nostalgia. But I don't think there are the same heroes about now that there were, those 20 years ago.
People always said after I won Wimbledon, have you come off from cloud 9? I said no, because I don't think I will.
Wimbledon is tennis, that's it. No more, no less.
It must be love, love, love.
They were just adored because they brought something so different to tennis.
Nothing more, nothing less. Love is the best.
We did it the way the song, I did it my way. That Sinatra said it, so we did it our way. To feel like you're part of something big, even now, I feel like goosebumps talking about it.